The crystal spires of Lysara pierced the nebula-streaked heavens, iridescent cities clinging to their heights like luminous fungi. Below, rivers of liquid light flowed through valleys carved from amethyst and sapphire, illuminating the violet-skinned Lysarans, who moved with inherent grace through their ancestral home. In the heart of the capital, within the grandest spire of all, stood the Virellan Palace, a structure of living crystal that pulsed with contained energy. The seat of power for millennia, it was, here, amidst the shimmering corridors and echoing halls, that the weight of an ancient promise was about to descend upon two unwilling souls. A century had passed since the Great Scourge, a conflict that had threatened to shatter the fragile peace between a dozen star systems. In the crucible of that war, an unlikely alliance had been forged. Commander Cassian Ashbryn, a human of rugged determination and unmatched tactical genius, leader of the scattered remnants of his people, had stood shoulder to shoulder with Lord Avelia Virellan, a Lysaran noble whose command over the planet's unique energy fields could shatter asteroids. Their combined might had turned the tide, their mutual respect cemented in the blood of their enemies. To ensure their alliance endured, to bind their houses against future threats, they had sworn a pact, solemn and absolute. Their descendants, when the time was right, would unite through marriage, merging the nascent potential of humanity with the established power of Lysara. House Ashbryn, however, had vanished from the galactic stage shortly after Cassian's death. Consumed by whispers of betrayal and massacre, they were presumed extinct. Their part of the pact, a forgotten footnote in the annals of the Virellan dynasty. Until now, a single ship, bearing the near-mythical Ashbryn crest, had pierced Lysaran space, carrying the last heir, Cassian's orphaned grandson, Cassian, raised in secrecy, trained by a guardian whose existence was more legend than fact. The mythical Celia, he had come to fulfill a duty he barely understood, to marry a princess he had never met. Within the palace's high council chamber, Princess Avelia Virellan stood beside her mother, Lady Alara, her posture rigid, her features, usually serene, drawn tight with displeasure. The news had been delivered moments before. The human had arrived. The pact, long thought void, was active. Avelia's hands clenched at her sides, the faint violet energy that coursed beneath her skin, momentarily flaring brighter around her fingertips. She was the heir to Lysara, trained since birth in diplomacy, statecraft, and the subtle manipulation of Lysaran energies. Her future was meant to be one of power, of leading her people, perhaps even expanding their influence. It was not meant to be tethered to a relic from a dead house. A primitive human, a human, Avelia finally said, her voice low but sharp, cutting through the chamber's expectant silence. Mother, this is absurd. House Ashbryn is dust. This creature cannot possibly represent anything of value. The pact was made under duress, in a time of war. It holds no meaning now. Lady Alara, her own violet skin, a shade deeper, her eyes holding the wisdom of decades, turned slightly towards her daughter. The pact was sworn. Avelia, blood and honor bind us. Lord Varen's word is the foundation upon which this palace stands. To break it now would be unthinkable. It would show weakness. Invite challenges from houses like Vornar. Avelia recoiled slightly at the mention of House Vornar, their most persistent and ruthless rivals. But a human, they are fragile, unrefined, their lifespans are a blink. What strength can he possibly bring? What honor is there in binding our lineage to such inadequacy? Her gaze swept across the chamber, seeking support from the assembled council members, their faces impassive masks of courtly neutrality. Yet she could sense their shared unease. Marrying outside their own kind was rare. Marrying a human, unheard of. Commander Cassian Ashbryn was not inadequate. Lady Alara countered, her tone firm. He saved Lord Veron's life twice. His strategies broke the Scourge's fleet. There may be more to this heir than you assume. Do not let prejudice cloud your judgment. Daughter, observe, assess. But the pact will be honored. Avelia pressed her lips together, a spark of defiance in her amethyst eyes. I will observe, she conceded, though her tone lacked conviction. But I will not pretend this union is anything other than a political burden, a distasteful obligation. The thought of sharing her life, her future, her lineage with a primitive human sent a wave of revulsion through her. It felt like a contamination. The great crystal doors at the end of the hall slid open with a soft chime, announcing the arrival. Every head turned. Two royal guards, clad in shimmering energy-laced armor, stepped aside, revealing the figure standing between them. Cassian Ashbryn was not what Avelia had expected. The historical depictions of Cassian Ashbryn showed a rugged, broad-shouldered warrior. This young man was lean, almost gaunt, his simple, dark tunic doing little to conceal a wiry strength. His hair was dark and cut short, his eyes a startlingly intense shade of gray, seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it. He carried an aura of stillness, an unnerving calm that seemed out of place in the opulent splendor of the Virellan court. There was a hardness in his gaze, a shadow of loss that hinted at a life far removed from the privilege surrounding her. He wasn't physically imposing in the way of Lyceran warriors, yet there was an undeniable presence about him. He met Avelia's hostile stare directly, his expression unreadable. He walked forward, his steps measured and silent on the crystalline floor. He stopped before the dais where Lady Alara and Avelia stood, offering a slight, formal inclination of his head. It was not the deep bow of a supplicant, but the acknowledgement of an equal. However misplaced Avelia thought that equality was. Lady Virellan, Princess Avelia. Cassian's voice was quiet, yet it carried clearly in the chamber. It held a neutral tone, devoid of warmth, but also free of subservience. I am Cassian of House Ashbryn. I have come as summoned, according to the pact sworn by our ancestors. Avelia felt a fresh surge of resentment. His very presence was an affront. Summoned is the correct term. Human, she replied, her voice laced with undisguised scorn. Though we had long believed your house incapable of answering any call. She watched for a reaction, a flicker of anger or shame. But his gray eyes remained steady, betraying nothing. Lady Alara shot Avelia a warning look before addressing Cassian, her tone more measured. Welcome to Lysara, Cassian Ashbryn. Your arrival is unexpected, but the word of Lord Veron and Commander Cassian is law. We shall honor the alliance. She paused, studying him intently. You are the last of your line. I am, Cassian confirmed, his voice flat. The unspoken history of that statement, the massacre that had orphaned him, hung heavy in the air, though he gave no outward sign of the pain it represented. He had learned long ago from Celia to shield his emotions, to present an unbreachable front, and you understand the terms. The marriage pact, Lady Alara pressed. I understand that my grandfather swore an oath, Cassian said simply. My guardian ensured I was prepared to fulfill it, should the need arise. Avelia scoffed softly. Prepared. What preparation could possibly bridge the chasm between their species, their stations? And what preparation could a human possibly undertake to be worthy of a Virellan union? She challenged, unable to help herself. Cassian's gaze shifted fully to her then. For the first time, Avelia saw something flicker in their depths, not anger, but something colder, sharper, It was gone as quickly as it appeared. Perhaps, he said, his voice still quiet but with an edge that hadn't been there before. Worthiness is not determined solely by birthright. Princess, the subtle rebuke stung. Avelia opened her mouth to retort, but her mother placed a gentle hand on her arm, a silent command for restraint. Lady Alara addressed Cassian again. You will be given quarters within the palace. Arrangements for the bonding ceremony will proceed. For now, rest. You have traveled far. Cassian gave another slight nod. Thank you, Lady Virellan. He turned, his gaze briefly sweeping over the assembled council members, none of whom met his eyes, before walking back towards the entrance, escorted by the guards. As the crystal doors slid shut behind him, a tense silence filled the chamber. Avelia turned to her mother, her frustration boiling over. Mother, you cannot be serious. He is nothing. A ghost from a forgotten war. Marrying him is a mockery. He is the heir of Cassian Ashbryn, Lady Alara stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. And he is here. The pact holds. Whether you find it distasteful or not. Avelia, you are a princess of Lysara. You will do your duty, and perhaps, she added, her gaze thoughtful as she looked towards the door where Cassian had departed. You should reserve judgment. There is a depth to that young man's eyes. Still waters, as the old saying goes. Avelia crossed her arms, unconvinced. Still waters or stagnant pool, it made no difference. He was human, inherently lesser. Binding herself to him felt like shackling a starship to a piece of driftwood. Disgusting. The word echoed in her mind, a bitter counterpoint to the palace's shimmering harmony. She would endure this, perform her duty, but she would never accept him. Never. Cassian followed the guards through corridors that seemed sculpted from pure light and energy. The air hummed faintly, a resonance entirely alien to the sterile metal and recycled atmosphere of the hidden asteroid base where Celia had raised him. Lysara was beautiful, undeniably so, but its beauty felt cold, sharp-edged, like the stares of the council members and the undisguised hostility of the princess. Avelia Virellan. She was exactly as Celia had predicted, proud, powerful within her own sphere, and deeply prejudiced against his kind. Her scorn had been palpable, a physical force in the room, a human, disgusting. The sentiment, if not the exact words, had been clear. He felt a familiar ache deep within him, the echo of loss, the memory of fire and screams that Celia had helped him suppress but never fully erase. His family, slaughtered by rivals seeking to obliterate House Ashbryn's claim, rivals who likely still lurked in the shadows. He was here not just for the pact, but for survival, for the slim chance that the Virellan alliance could offer protection, a chance to rebuild what had been stolen. Celia had been clear. The pact was his only shield, his only path forward. But facing Avelia's contempt, the court's skepticism, it was a different kind of battle than the ones he had trained for. The guards led him to a suite of rooms high in one of the palace spires. The walls were translucent crystal, offering breathtaking views of the city and the nebula-painted sky beyond. The furnishings were elegant, minimalist, formed from the same living crystal as the palace itself. It was luxurious, yet felt utterly alien. He ran a hand over a smooth, cool tabletop that seemed to ripple faintly with internal light. This was Avelia's world, a world of inherent power and ancient lineage. His world had been one of hiding, training, and survival. He dismissed the guards with a quiet word of thanks they seemed surprised to receive. Alone, he finally let his shoulders slump slightly. He walked to the crystalline window, looking out at the alien cityscape. Celia's training had been rigorous, brutal at times. She had pushed him physically and mentally, honing his reflexes, his strategic thinking. But more than that, she had helped him unlock the dormant potential within his bloodline, the strange ability that set him apart not just from Lycerans, but from other humans. The power to subtly warp the fabric of space around him, a legacy from some forgotten ancestor, perhaps even Kale himself, though the legends never spoke of it. It was a secret Celia had guarded fiercely, warning him never to reveal it unless absolutely necessary. Power invites fear and jealousy. Cassian. She had warned him countless times. Keep your true strength hidden until the moment it can save your life or secure your future. Was this court, this forced marriage, the future she had envisioned? He doubted it, but it was the path laid before him. He thought of Avelia's dismissive words, her revulsion. He couldn't blame her entirely. From her perspective, he was an unwelcome relic, a disruption to her life. Yet, her prejudice stung. He was more than just human. He was the last Ashbryn. He carried the legacy of Kale, the weight of his murdered family, and he possessed a power these arrogant nobles couldn't comprehend. He closed his eyes, focusing inward, feeling the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the space around him. He could sense the geometric structure of reality, the points where it could be, nudged. With a minimal effort of will, the view outside the window shimmered, distances momentarily contracting and expanding like breath. He let the effect fade, conserving his energy. It was a draining ability, one Celia had taught him to use with precision and restraint. A chime echoed through the room. A soft voice announced, "Lord Cassian, your presence is requested at the evening reception in the Grand Hall." So soon. No time to acclimate, no time to truly rest. The Virellans were testing him, parading him before their court, forcing him to endure their scrutiny. He straightened his tunic, smoothed his hair, and recomposed his features into the neutral mask Celia had taught him to wear. Very well, let them look, let them judge. He would endure. He was an Ashbryn, and Ashbryns, despite what the galaxy believed, did not break easily. He walked towards the door, the strange calm settling over him once more, a shield against the storm of contempt he knew awaited him. The first test had been the arrival. The next would be survival within the glittering cage of the Virellan court. The grand hall of the Virellan palace was a cavern of light and sound. Crystal facets refracted the ambient energy, casting shimmering rainbows across the throngs of Lyceran nobles. They moved with languid grace, their violet skin tones ranging from pale lilac to deep amethyst, adorned in fabrics that seemed woven from starlight. Music, a complex tapestry of harmonic resonances, filled the air. Cassian felt acutely out of place, a monochrome figure in a vibrant spectrum. Every eye seemed to track his movement as he entered, whispers following him like static. He kept his expression neutral, his gaze sweeping the room, cataloging faces, assessing the power dynamics evident in posture and proximity. He spotted Avelia near the center of the hall, standing beside her mother. She was breathtaking, even more so than in the council chamber. She wore a gown of deep indigo that shimmered with captured light, accentuating her regal bearing. She was engaged in conversation with a tall, imposing Lyceran male whose silver tunic marked him as a member of a high-ranking house. His gaze lingered on Avelia with an intensity that seemed proprietary. Cassian instinctively disliked him. Lady Alara noticed Cassian's arrival and beckoned him over with a subtle gesture as he approached. The conversation paused. Avelia's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, her eyes flicking towards him with cool dismissal before returning to the silver-clad noble. "Lord Cassian," Lady Alara said, her voice carrying easily over the hum of the crowd. "Allow me to introduce Lord Theron, of House Volterras. Theron turned, his eyes, a shade darker than Avelia's, raking over Cassian with open assessment, bordering on insolence. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way. "Ah, the human," Theron drawled, a faint smirk playing on his lips. The subject of much curiosity, he offered no gesture of greeting. Cassian met his gaze evenly. "Lord Theron." He kept his acknowledgement brief, refusing to be drawn into Theron's attempt at provocation. Avelia spoke then, addressing Theron, though her words were clearly aimed at Cassian as well. Theron was just expressing his concerns about the revival of this ancient pact. "Mother, concerns many of us share, concerns about diluting a noble bloodline with primitive stock," Theron added smoothly, his eyes fixed on Cassian. "Understandable, wouldn't you say, Ashbryn?" Cassian felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, but his face remained impassive. Sleia's voice echoed in his memory. "Never let them see your anger. Control is your armor. Concerns about the past are often masks for anxieties about the future." "Lord Theron," Cassian replied calmly, "House Ashbryn honors its commitments. Perhaps House Volterras holds alliances less sacredly." Theron's smirk faltered, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. Lady Alara intervened quickly, placing a hand on Theron's arm. "Theron, Cassian is our guest, and soon to be family. Let us maintain civility." Her tone was light, but her grip conveyed a warning. Theron inclined his head stiffly. "Of course, Lady Alara, civility above all." But his eyes promised Cassian that this was far from over. He turned his attention back to Avelia, deliberately excluding Cassian from the conversation. Avelia seemed content with this arrangement, offering Cassian only her shoulder. He stood there for a moment, an awkward appendage to their noble triad. He could feel the weight of countless stares, hear the sibilant whispers speculating about him, about the absurdity of the union. He felt a surge of defiance. He would not stand here like a pariah in their midst. With a quiet nod to Lady Alara, ignoring Avelia and Theron completely, he turned and moved away, heading towards the edge of the hall. He found a relatively unoccupied alcove, partially shielded by a crystalline pillar, offering a vantage point over the room without being directly in the spotlight. He observed the intricate social dance of the Lassaran nobility, the subtle shifts in alliances, the veiled rivalries playing out in glances and gestures. It was a complex web, and he was the foreign object caught within it. He noticed Avelia watching him from across the room, her brow furrowed slightly. Was it surprise that he hadn't simply endured the dismissal, or was she merely assessing his reaction? Their gazes met for a brief instant before she looked away, resuming her conversation with Theron, though perhaps with a fraction less enthusiasm than before. Time stretched on. Cassian maintained his position, politely deflecting the occasional curious noble who approached him with thinly veiled questions about human customs or the fate of his house. He offered minimal, non-committal answers, his reserve acting as a shield. He felt increasingly isolated, the alien nature of his surroundings pressing in on him. Suddenly, a disturbance rippled through the crowd near the main dais, where Lady Alara now stood, speaking with several council members. A commotion, raised voices. Cassian straightened, his senses instantly alert. He saw a flash of movement, a Lysaran noble lunging not towards the dais, but towards Lady Alara herself. The noble was Lorivas, a known hothead from a minor house with grievances against the Virellans. He moved with surprising speed, his hand outstretched, crackling with faint, disruptive energy, a forbidden technique meant to destabilize a Lysaran's internal energy field. The royal guards reacted, but they were a split second too slow. caught off guard by the suddenness and audacity of the attack within the palace's heart. Avelia, standing several meters away, cried out her mother's name, starting forward. Theron hesitated, seemingly assessing the political implications rather than reacting instinctively. But Cassian didn't hesitate. Sullia's training kicked in: assess, react, neutralize. There was no time for subtle manipulation, no time for hiding. Lady Alara was the linchpin of this alliance, the mother of his intended. Her safety was paramount. In the instant Lorivas's hand was about to touch Lady Alara, Cassian acted. He didn't move from his alcove. Instead, he focused his will, reaching out with that hidden sense, grasping the fabric of space between himself and the attacker. He pulled. To the onlookers, it seemed impossible. One moment, Cassian was standing 20 meters away by a pillar. The next, with a soundless shimmer, a distortion that defied logic, he was directly behind Lorivas, his hand clamping down on the attacker's outstretched arm like iron. Simultaneously, the space Lorivas had been about to occupy seemed to contract, pulling him backward with irresistible force, off balance, his energy attack dissipating harmlessly. Lorivas stumbled, shocked, finding himself restrained by the human who should have been nowhere near him. He twisted, snarling, trying to break free, but Cassian's grip was unyielding. With a precise, calculated movement, Cassian applied pressure to a nerve cluster in Lorivas's arm, causing him to cry out and collapse, his limb going limp. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. Silence crashed down upon the grand hall. The music died. Every single Lyzeran stared, stunned, at the scene. The human, the weak, primitive human, had just moved faster than thought, appearing from nowhere to incapacitate a Lyzeran noble with chilling efficiency. The royal guards quickly surrounded the fallen Lorivas, dragging him away. Lady Alara, composed but visibly shaken, looked at Cassian, her eyes wide with astonishment and something else: calculation. Avelia stared, her mouth slightly open, her earlier disdain momentarily forgotten, replaced by sheer disbelief. Theron's face was a mask of shock and, perhaps, fear. Cassian released his breath slowly, the adrenaline fading. He hadn't wanted to reveal his ability, not like this. But there had been no choice. He straightened up, meeting Lady Alara's intense gaze. He saw the questions forming in her eyes, the implications of what she had just witnessed. "Are you unharmed, Lady Virellan?" Cassian asked, his voice steady, breaking the silence. Lady Alara took a moment, composing herself. "I am, thanks to your timely intervention, Lord Cassian." Her voice was measured, but the underlying surprise was evident, an unexpected display of agility, instinct. Cassian replied curtly, offering no further explanation. He knew the word was inadequate, but anything more would invite questions he wasn't ready to answer. Avelia walked towards them, her earlier hostility replaced by a searching, confused expression. She stopped before Cassian, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. How did you do that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "No one can move that fast." Cassian met her gaze. He saw the crack in her certainty, the first hint of doubt about her preconceived notions. "As I said, princess, instinct." He offered her the same impassive mask he showed the court. But Avelia wasn't so easily dismissed this time. She saw the deflection, recognized the evasion. "That wasn't instinct," she insisted quietly, her eyes narrowed. "That was something else." Before Cassian could respond, Lady Alara stepped forward, resuming control. "Lord Lorivas will be dealt with severely. Such an affront cannot be tolerated. She turned to the assembled nobles, her voice ringing with authority. The reception is concluded. Return to your duties. The dismissal was absolute, and the nobles, still murmuring and casting bewildered glances at Cassian, began to disperse. Lady Alara then turned back to Cassian and Avelia. Cassian, Avelia, my private chambers, now. Her tone left no room for refusal, as they followed Lady Alara through the now emptying hall. Cassian could feel Avelia's gaze on him, persistent and questioning. The dynamic had shifted. He had revealed a fraction of his true self, shattering their perception of him as a mere human placeholder. He had earned astonishment, perhaps even a grudging respect from Lady Alara, but also suspicion. And from Avelia, her disdain had fractured, replaced by a confusing mix of shock and intense curiosity. He had defended her mother, proven himself capable in a way no one expected. He had shown them that House Ashbryn was not entirely without power, but in doing so, he had also made himself a target, an anomaly. The quiet life Sleia had envisioned seemed further away than ever. The path forward had just become infinitely more complicated, and potentially far more dangerous. He glanced at Avelia, her brow still furrowed in thought. Her resentment might be fading, but intrigue could be just as perilous. In the quiet sanctuary of Lady Alara's private chambers, the vibrant energy of the palace muted to a soft hum. The tension was thick enough to feel. Lady Alara sat behind a desk carved from luminous moonwood, her gaze fixed on Cassian, who stood before her alongside Avelia. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a keen, analytical intensity. "Explain," Lady Alara commanded, her voice calm but firm. "Explain what we witnessed in the Grand Hall. Instinct does not suffice." Cassian met her gaze directly. He had known this was coming. Sleia had prepared him for the possibility of revelation, though neither had anticipated it happening so soon or so publicly. He had two choices: lie or offer a partial truth. Lying felt perilous. Lady Alara was clearly perceptive. A partial truth, however, carried its own risks. "My apologies, Lady Virellan, if my actions caused alarm," Cassian began, choosing his words carefully. "My guardian," Sleia provided. Extensive training. It focused on threat assessment and preemptive neutralization. What you saw was a result of that training, anticipating the attack and positioning myself to intervene. He deliberately avoided mentioning the spatial manipulation. Avelia stepped forward slightly. "Positioning yourself. Cassian, you were across the hall. One moment you were by the pillar, the next you were behind Lorivas. That isn't positioning. That's impossible." Her voice held not scorn now, but genuine confusion and a demand for answers. "Lysaran physiology and human physiology are different, Princess," Cassian countered smoothly, falling back on a prepared deflection. "Perhaps your perception of human speed and reaction time is limited." It was a weak argument, and he knew it, but it was the only shield he had short of revealing everything. Lady Alara leaned back, steepling her fingers, her eyes narrowed. "Limited perception. Cassian Ashbryn, I have commanded fleets alongside your grandfather. I have seen human soldiers in battle. I have studied xenobiology extensively. What I saw tonight defied the known physical limitations of your species. Do not insult my intelligence or my experience." Cassian remained silent, holding her gaze. He wouldn't elaborate, wouldn't offer more fuel for their speculation. Let them wonder. Avelia looked from her mother to Cassian, frustration warring with intrigue on her face. "Why won't you just tell us? What are you hiding?" "I am hiding nothing, Princess," Cassian said, his tone carefully neutral. "I acted to protect your mother. As was my duty under the alliance our houses share. Is the method truly more important than the outcome? Lady Alara considered him for a long moment. Perhaps not, she conceded slowly. But it is significant. You possess capabilities we did not anticipate. Capabilities that might make this alliance more balanced than we initially assumed. A flicker of calculation crossed her face. A powerful, unknown quantity was more valuable than a known weakness. This changes things, but it also invites danger. What you did tonight will not go unnoticed or uncommented upon. Houses like Voltaris, like Vornar, they will see you not just as an inconvenient human heir, but as a potential threat or a potential pawn. Ah, Vornar. The name sent a chill down Cassian's spine. The name Celia had whispered was behind his family's destruction. I am aware of the political landscape. Lady Virellan, Cassian said quietly. Celia ensured I understood the forces at play. Did she? Lady Alara murmured, her gaze sharpening. This Celia, she is quite the enigma. To have trained you so effectively, to have kept you hidden all these years. Who is she? She was my guardian, Cassian replied, offering no more. Celia's identity and location were secrets he would protect with his life. Lady Alara seemed to sense the boundary and didn't press further. For now, she turned her attention to Avelia. Daughter, your initial assessment appears to have been incomplete. Cassian Ashbryn is clearly more than he seemed. Avelia didn't answer immediately. She was still looking at Cassian, her expression complex. The disdain was gone, replaced by a grudging curiosity, perhaps even a flicker of respect for his actions. However, inexplicable. His methods are unorthodox, she said carefully. But he protected you, Mother. For that, he has my gratitude. The word seemed difficult for her to pronounce, yet she said it. Cassian felt a slight, almost imperceptible easing of the tension within him. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall of her prejudice. Gratitude is a start, Lady Alara said. Understanding and trust must follow if this alliance is to be more than ink on parchment. Both of you need to make an effort. She rose from her desk. Cassian, your actions tonight have bought you a measure of respect, but also increased scrutiny. Be vigilant. Avelia, put aside your preconceptions. Learn about your betrothed, the future of our house, and perhaps Lysara itself, may depend on the strength of this bond. She gestured towards the door. You are dismissed. The preparations for the bonding ceremony will continue, perhaps with renewed focus. As they left the chamber and walked down the silent corridor, an awkward silence stretched between Cassian and Avelia. He expected her to resume her frosty demeanor, but instead, she slowed her pace slightly, glancing at him sideways. That noble you stopped, she said, her voice low. Lorivas, his house has held a grudge against mine for generations, claiming we usurped their ancestral lands centuries ago. He is known for his temper, but never for such public audacity. Cassian nodded slowly, processing the information. An act of desperation, perhaps. Or was he encouraged? Avelia frowned. Encouraged. By whom? Those who might benefit from instability within House Virellan. Cassian suggested quietly. Like Lord Theron's House Voltaris. Or the Vornars you mentioned. Avelia stopped, turning to face him fully. The ambient light caught the intricate patterns beneath her violet skin. You believe Theron or Malric Vornar would incite an attack on my mother within our own palace. The idea seemed almost too treacherous. Yet Cassian's calm logic gave it weight. Powerful houses often play long games, Princess, Cassian said, creating chaos, testing defenses, observing reactions. Lorivas may have been a disposable piece, sent to gauge the strength of your security, and perhaps to gauge me. Avelia studied his face intently. You think this was about you? Testing the new arrival. It's possible. Cassian conceded. My arrival disrupts the status quo. My intervention tonight disrupts it further. Those who oppose this alliance or seek to exploit it would want to know what they are dealing with. Avelia fell silent again, considering his words. She looked down the corridor, then back at him. You are not what I expected, Cassian Ashbryn. Few things are, Princess, he replied softly. My name is Avelia, she corrected him, a hint of impatience in her tone, but significantly less hostility than before. He inclined his head slightly. Avelia. They resumed walking, the silence less strained now, filled with unspoken thoughts. Cassian had survived another test. But Lady Alara was right. The stakes had been raised. He was no longer just the unwanted human fiancé. He was an unknown variable, a potential power player, and a target. And Avelia, her perception of him was irrevocably altered. The disgust was fading, replaced by a wary, intense curiosity. Whether that curiosity would blossom into trust or suspicion remained to be seen. The path ahead was fraught with political intrigue, hidden dangers, and the undeniable fact that he, the last Ashbryn, possessed a power that could change everything, for better or for worse. He just had to survive long enough to find out which. The days following the reception settled into a tense routine. Cassian spent much of his time in the palace archives, ostensibly studying Lysaran history and customs as befitting a future consort. In reality, he searched for any mention, however oblique, of his own house, of Cael Ashbryn's time on Lysara, and, most importantly, any records pertaining to House Vornar and their activities around the time of his family's massacre. The archive was vast, a labyrinth of glowing data crystals and shimmering energy matrices, but yielded little beyond standard historical accounts. The details surrounding House Ashbryn's fall seemed deliberately obscured or purged. Avelia, bound by her mother's command and her own burgeoning curiosity, made occasional, stiff attempts at conversation. She would find him in the archives or invite him to observe council briefings from a distance. Of course, their interactions were formal, stilted, yet beneath the surface, a current of change was flowing. Avelia asked pointed questions about human culture, about his upbringing, careful never to pry too deeply into the sensitive territory of his family's fate or Sullia, but clearly trying to reconcile the image of the primitive human with the man who had moved like a phantom and spoken with unsettling insight. Your grasp of galactic politics is surprising, she remarked one afternoon, after he made a quiet observation about the potential fallout of a trade dispute mentioned in a briefing. They stood on a balcony overlooking the crystalline city, the twin suns of Lysara casting long, violet shadows. Survival necessitates awareness. Avelia, Cassian replied, gazing out at the alien skyline. When you have little power, understanding the flow of it becomes essential. And yet, you demonstrated considerable power defending my mother, she countered, turning to face him. You still haven't explained that. He met her gaze, the intensity in his gray eyes unwavering. Some skills are best kept in reserve, used only when necessary. Like a hidden weapon, she pressed. Like a shield, he corrected gently. Against those who might wish you harm. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. She understood threats. She had lived with them her entire life, the price of being heir to a powerful house. Theron continues to watch you, she warned quietly. He speaks against the marriage in private circles, suggesting you are unstable, perhaps even a Vornar plant sent to destabilize us from within. Cassian wasn't surprised. Theron's pride had been wounded, and his ambition was likely threatened by Cassian's unexpected capabilities. Let him talk. Words are only wind. Actions reveal intent. And what is your intent, Cassian? Avelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the question hanging between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw past the princess, past the initial prejudice, to the intelligent, capable woman burdened by duty, wary of the future. My intent, he said slowly, is to honor the pact my grandfather made, to survive, and perhaps to find justice for what was taken from my house. The mention of justice resonated with her. Lysaran culture placed a high value on honor and the righting of wrongs. The Vornars, she stated, understanding dawning in her eyes. You believe they were responsible for your family's disappearance. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Celia believes so. All evidence points towards them. Malric Vornar. Avelia breathed. The name like ice. He is ruthless, ambitious. His house has coveted Lysara's resources for decades. They have always been our shadow, our most dangerous rival. She paused, thinking, if he destroyed House Ashbryn to prevent this alliance from ever strengthening House Virellan, it fits his pattern. A shared enemy, a potential common ground, forged in suspicion and the quest for truth. It was a fragile bridge, but it was the first real connection between them. Their tentative understanding was shattered less than a week later. The attack, when it came, was brutally swift and utterly unexpected. Striking not at Cassian directly, but at the heart of Virellan power. Cassian was in his quarters, attempting to decipher a coded fragment he'd found in the archives, a mention of a shadow protocol linked to Cassian Ashbryn, when the palace alarms shrieked, not the controlled chime of a minor alert, but the high-pitched, desperate wail of a full-scale security breach. Red emergency lighting pulsed through the crystalline walls, casting his room in blood-like hues. He was on his feet instantly. Celia's training surging to the forefront. Assess. Locate threat. Secure objective. His primary objective, according to the pact and his own nascent feelings, was Avelia. He flung open his door. The corridor outside was chaos. Guards rushed past, energy staffs crackling. Distant sounds of explosions and energy weapon fire echoed through the palace structure. Report! Cassian grabbed the arm of a passing guard sergeant. Attackers breached the lower levels. Sir, the sergeant yelled over the din. Multiple points. They're heading for the central spire. The council chambers. Communications are jammed. The council chambers, where Lady Alara and Avelia would likely be. Cassian didn't hesitate. He pushed past the sergeant, moving against the flow of retreating personnel, heading towards the palace core. He moved quickly, efficiently, his senses on high alert. He saw flashes of unfamiliar uniforms, dark gray armor marked with a jagged crimson sigil he didn't recognize, but it felt menacingly familiar. Vornar shock troops. He rounded a corner and came face to face with two of the attackers. They raised their pulse rifles, but Cassian was faster. He didn't draw a weapon. He used the environment and his unique ability. With a flick of his wrist and a focused thought, the section of crystalline floor beneath their feet buckled upwards, sending them crashing into the ceiling. Before they could recover, he closed the distance. A precise strike disabled one. The other met a swift, incapacitating blow to the temple. He didn't kill them. Celia had taught him the value of prisoners, of information. But there was no time now. He pressed on, the sounds of fighting growing louder. He reached the antechamber to the council chambers. The great crystal doors were sealed, scorch marks marring their surface. Several royal guards lay dead or wounded. Inside, he could hear the distinct sound of Lysaron energy discharges mixed with the heavier thrum of unfamiliar weapons. He placed his hand on the door, concentrating. He couldn't force it open without revealing the full extent of his power, potentially draining himself dangerously. He needed another way. His eyes scanned the intricate crystal patterns of the wall beside the door. He remembered seeing schematics in the archive, ancient service conduits, hidden passages built into the palace's living structure by its first architects. Focusing his spatial sense, he felt for the faint void, the discontinuity Celia had taught him to detect. There, a narrow maintenance tunnel, barely wide enough for one person, running parallel to the main corridor. He placed his palm flat against the wall where the tunnel entrance should be. With a silent exertion of will, he didn't break the crystal, but subtly shifted the space around a hair-thin seam. The seam widened, revealing a dark opening. He slipped inside just as another explosion rocked the corridor behind him. The tunnel was pitch black, cramped, and resonated with the palace's internal energy hum. He moved by touch and instinct, his spatial sense giving him a crude map of the immediate area. He could feel the vibrations of the battle raging in the council chamber just meters away. He heard a voice, amplified, chillingly familiar from historical recordings Celia had shown him. And so, the decadent era of Virellan rule ends. The voice was cold, sharp, dripping with triumph. Lysara will finally have strong leadership that understands power. Malric Vorner. Cassian's blood ran cold. He was here, in the palace, leading the attack. This wasn't just an assault, it was a full-blown coup, and Avelia and her mother were trapped. Inside, he moved faster, ignoring the sharp edges of the conduit scraping against his tunic. He felt the tunnel branch. One path led upwards, likely an escape route. The other continued alongside the council chamber. He could hear Avelia's voice now, sharp and defiant. "You are a traitor, Malric. Your ancestors would spit on your name." "My ancestors understood only one thing, Princess," Vorner's voice sneered. "Victory, something your house has grown too complacent to appreciate. Hand over the control matrices, Lady Alara, and perhaps I will grant your daughter a swift end." Cassian reached the point parallel to the chamber's main viewport. He focused again, carefully manipulating the space around a small section of the tunnel wall, creating a tiny, near-invisible aperture, a peephole into the chamber. The scene inside was grim. Lady Alara stood tall but pale behind the main console, flanked by two remaining royal guards who looked badly wounded. Avelia stood slightly in front of her mother, her hands glowing faintly with violet energy, her stance defiant but defensive. Facing them were Malric Vorner, clad in obsidian armor trimmed with crimson, a cruel smile on his face, and a dozen of his elite guard. Several Virellan council members lay injured or dead on the floor. Theron Volterra stood near Vornar, his expression unreadable but his position damning. He was a collaborator. Vornar gestured impatiently. "The matrices, Lady Alara, now. Or I start executing council members. Perhaps Lord Theron here would like the honor of the first shot." As a demonstration of his new loyalty, Theron flinched slightly but didn't protest. Lady Alara's face hardened. "Never." "So be it." Vornar raised his sidearm, pointing it towards a wounded council elder. Cassian knew he had only one chance. He couldn't fight all of them directly. He had to create a diversion, an escape. He looked at Avelia, saw the fear beneath her bravery. He focused on the space directly behind her and her mother, near a secondary exit panel he'd noted on the schematics. He gathered his will, drawing on his reserves. He pushed. not violently but decisively. The heavy console Lady Alara stood behind suddenly slid sideways several feet with a screech of protesting crystal, bumping into her and Avelia, pushing them both towards the secondary panel, just as Vornar fired. The energy bolt sizzled through the space where Lady Alara had been standing moments before, striking the far wall. Simultaneously, Cassian warped the space around the secondary exit panel's locking mechanism, causing it to disengage with a loud click. The panel slid open, revealing a dark passage. Now, Cassian projected his thought, not daring to speak aloud, focusing the mental command towards Avelia, hoping their strange, nascent connection was enough. The panel. Go. Confusion reigned for a split second. Vornar and his guards stared at the miraculously moved console. Then, at the suddenly open panel, Avelia, reacting instinctively to the push and the open escape route, grabbed her stunned mother's arm. "Mother, come on!" She pulled Lady Alara towards the opening. The two wounded royal guards, understanding immediately, turned and fired covering shots towards Vornar's troops, buying precious seconds before being cut down. "Stop them!" Vornar roared, realizing what was happening. He fired again, but Avelia and her mother were already scrambling into the dark passage. Cassian, from his hiding place, subtly warped the space around the closing mechanism, causing the panel to slam shut faster than normal. The locks engaging with a heavy thud just as energy blasts struck its surface. He didn't wait to see Vornar's reaction. He retreated back down the service tunnel, his heart pounding, his energy reserves dangerously low. He had saved them, for now. But they were fugitives in their own palace, hunted by a ruthless usurper. He had to find them, get them out. He raced towards the branching point, hoping Avelia had understood, hoping she had taken the upward path. The path that might lead to the hidden ways Celia had told him might still exist within the palace's ancient core. The fight for Lysara had begun, and he and Avelia were right in the heart of the storm. Cassian emerged from the service conduit into a dusty, forgotten section of the palace's upper levels. The sounds of battle distant but still palpable. Ancient tapestries, faded and torn, hung on walls that lacked the vibrant luminescence of the main palace. This area felt dormant, bypassed by centuries of renovations. Celia had spoken of these hollow ways, remnants of the palace's earliest construction, often used by spies or smugglers in ages past. If Avelia had any knowledge of them, or if instinct guided her, this was where she might lead her mother. He strained his senses, listening, probing gently with his spatial awareness. He caught a faint vibration, a displaced energy signature nearby. Moving cautiously through the gloom, guided by the faint emergency lighting filtering up from below, he approached a heavy, archaic-looking door set deep into the wall. It was slightly ajar. He pushed it open slowly. Inside was a small, disused observation chamber, thick with dust. Huddled in the far corner were Avelia and Lady Alara. Avelia held a small, crystal-bladed knife, her knuckles white, her eyes wide but alert, scanning the doorway. Lady Alara leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, one hand pressed to her side where a piece of shrapnel from the council chamber battle had apparently grazed her. Her usual composure was frayed, replaced by weariness and pain, but her eyes still held a spark of defiance. Seeing Cassian, Avelia visibly relaxed, though she didn't lower the knife immediately. "Cassian, how?" "Service tunnels," he replied quietly, stepping inside and closing the door securely. "Are you both all right?" He looked pointedly at Lady Alara's side. "A scratch." Lady Alara dismissed, though her pale face suggested otherwise. "Thanks to your intervention." She looked at him, really looked at him, the skepticism gone, replaced by a dawning understanding. That console moving, the door opening, that was you. Again. Cassian nodded. There was no other way. Avelia lowered the knife, stepping closer. Malric Vornar, he has the palace. Theron betrayed us. Her voice was tight with anger and disbelief. I saw. Cassian confirmed grimly. We need to get out of the palace. Regroup. Are there other ways out from here? These old passages. Avelia glanced at her mother. Lady Ilara nodded weakly. There are. Legends. Tunnels leading beyond the city walls, used by the first builders. My great-grandmother mentioned them once, said they started somewhere. Somewhere near the ancestral crypts. The crypts are levels below us, back towards the central spire, Avelia said. Frowning. Getting there will be impossible. Not impossible, Cassian countered, his mind racing. Difficult. We can use the hollow ways, avoid the main corridors, but we need to move now, before Vornar seals off these upper levels. He looked at Lady Ilara's injury. Can you walk? I will walk, Lady Ilara stated, pushing herself upright, wincing as she did. Lysara needs its leader. Avelia needs, she faltered, looking at her daughter with fear and determination. Avelia tore a strip of fabric from her damaged gown and began binding her mother's wound as best she could. We stick together. We survived this. She looked at Cassian, a new sense of shared purpose in her eyes. The barriers of rank and species felt suddenly irrelevant in the face of their shared danger. Lead the way. Cassian, tell us what to do. Trust. Earned in chaos and fire. Cassian felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He gave a firm nod. All right. Stay close. Stay quiet. Follow me. He opened the door slightly, peering out, using his senses to probe the immediate area. Clear. He led them out of the chamber and into the labyrinthine network of forgotten corridors and stairwells. They moved like ghosts through the bones of the palace, the distant echoes of the coup serving as a grim reminder of the forces hunting them. Their progress was slow, hampered by Lady Ilara's injury and the need for constant caution. Cassian took the lead, his spatial sense invaluable in navigating the confusing passages and detecting potential patrols moving in the main corridors beyond the walls. Avelia walked close behind him, supporting her mother, her knife held ready, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. They spoke little, conserving energy, communicating through gestures and whispers. In the enforced proximity and shared peril, a strange intimacy developed. Cassian found himself acutely aware of Avelia's presence beside him, the faint scent of ozone that clung to her like all Lycerans. The determined set of her jaw, the way her violet eyes reflected the dim light. He saw her courage, her resilience, her fierce love for her mother and her people. She, in turn, watched him, observing his unnatural calm, his decisive movements, the way he seemed to anticipate dangers before they materialized. Hours crawled by. They bypassed several Vornar patrols, hiding in shadowed alcoves or diverting down intersecting tunnels Cassian detected just moments before discovery. Lady Ilara grew weaker, her breathing more labored, but she refused to stop, leaning heavily on Avelia. Finally, guided by Cassian's senses and Lady Ilara's fragmented memories, they reached a section of the palace deep beneath the main levels, the air cooler, the crystal walls rougher, less refined. The ancestral crypts, Lady Ilara whispered, recognizing the archaic energy signatures. The entrance to the deep tunnels should be near here. They found it behind a crumbling relief carving depicting the first Virellan migration to Lysara, a barely visible seam that Cassian, once again, manipulated with his power, causing a section of the wall to slide inward, revealing a dark, descending tunnel. The air that wafted out was cold, ancient, smelling of stone and deep earth. "This way," Lady Alara urged, seeming to draw strength from the proximity to her ancestors. The tunnel was steep, rough-hewn, clearly not intended for regular use. They descended into the planet's crust, leaving the living crystal of the palace behind, entering natural rock formations laced with energy veins. The silence here was profound, broken only by their footsteps and labored breathing. "How far do these tunnels go?" Cassian asked Avelia as they paused for a brief rest, letting Lady Alara sit. "Legends say they reach the Whisperwind Peaks, beyond the city's energy shield," Avelia replied, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "A place forbidden even to Virellans, considered sacred ground. If we can reach them, we'll be exposed, but free of the palace," Cassian finished. "Vornar won't expect us to escape this way." He looked at Avelia. "Your knife won't be enough out there. And my abilities have limits, especially when I'm tired." Avelia nodded grimly. "I know. But we have to try. We have to find loyalists, rally support, take back our home." She looked at her mother, whose eyes were closed, her face etched with pain. "We will not let Malric Vornar win." They pressed on. The tunnel twisting and turning, sometimes opening into vast natural caverns filled with glowing fungi, sometimes narrowing, forcing them to crawl. Cassian felt his energy reserves dwindling. Each use of his power, even the subtle manipulations to open passages or sense patrols, drained him. Sleia had warned him about overexertion. Just as despair began to set in, they felt a change in the air, a faint breeze carrying the scent of ozone and unfamiliar vegetation. The tunnel began to slope upwards. Ahead, they saw a faint light. They emerged cautiously from the tunnel mouth, finding themselves in a narrow canyon carved by ancient winds. Above them, jagged peaks pierced a sky dominated by Lysara's swirling nebulae. They were outside the city, beyond its shimmering energy shield. They had made it, but their relief was short-lived. As they stepped fully into the open, a voice echoed down from the canyon rim above. Well, look what the tunnel spat out." They looked up. Silhouetted against the nebulae stood Lord Theron Volterus, flanked by half a dozen Vornar soldiers aiming pulse rifles down at them. Theron's expression was one of smug satisfaction. "Running away, princess." Theron called down mockingly. "Did you really think Malric wouldn't anticipate such a move? He knows all the palace's secrets, including the ones your ancestors tried to bury." Avelia instinctively stepped in front of her mother, her hand tightening on her knife. Cassian moved beside her, shielding them both as best he could, his mind racing, searching for an escape, any option. But they were trapped in the narrow canyon, exposed, outnumbered, and outgunned. Theron had anticipated their escape route, or perhaps he had simply followed them. "It's over, Avelia," Theron said, savoring the moment. "Surrender, and Malric might grant you the mercy of serving the new order. Resist." He let the threat hang in the air, gesturing for his soldiers to take aim. Cassian met Avelia's gaze. He saw fear, yes, but also defiance. They hadn't come this far, endured so much, just to surrender to a traitor. Or, he prepared himself, gathering the last dregs of his strength for one final, desperate act, knowing it likely wouldn't be enough. This seemed like the end of the line. Suddenly, before Theron could give the order to fire, a new voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding, echoing strangely in the canyon. "Stand down, Volterus, unless you wish to challenge me directly." Everyone froze. Cassian's head snapped up, searching for the source of the voice. Standing on a rocky outcrop opposite Theron, unnoticed until she spoke. was a figure cloaked and hooded, radiating an aura of quiet power that even the Lazarans seemed to sense. She held no visible weapon, yet her presence commanded absolute attention. Cassian's breath caught in his throat. He knew that voice. He knew that presence. "Celia," he whispered, disbelief warring with overwhelming relief. Theron stared at the newcomer, momentarily thrown off balance. Who are you? Identify yourself." The hooded figure took a step forward into a patch of faint starlight. "I am merely concerned with the fate of House Ashbryn's heir and his companions." Celia's voice, though calm, carried an unmistakable undertone of menace. "Leave them, now." Theron hesitated, glancing at his soldiers, then back at the enigmatic figure. He clearly sensed something dangerous, something unpredictable about her. But his pride, and likely his fear of Vornar, wouldn't let him back down easily. "Lord Malric wants them alive. You interfere at your peril," he motioned to his soldiers. "Take them all! Fire!" The soldiers raised their rifles, but before they could shoot, Celia acted. She raised one hand, palm outward. The air around Theron and his soldiers seemed to shimmer, to distort, in a way sickeningly familiar to Cassian, yet far more powerful, far more controlled than his own abilities. The Vornar soldiers cried out as their rifles suddenly twisted in their hands, barrels bending into useless shapes as if made of soft clay. The space around Theron himself seemed to contract, crushing him inwards with invisible force. He gasped, clutching at his chest, his eyes wide with terror and agony, before collapsing onto the rock, unconscious or worse. The remaining soldiers, terrified and disarmed, scrambled back from the edge, staring at Celia with undisguised horror. Celia lowered her hand, the distortion fading. She turned her hooded head towards the canyon floor, where Cassian, Avelia, and Lady Alara stood frozen in astonishment. "Are you all right?" "Cassian." Celia's voice was softer now, devoid of the chilling power she had just displayed. "Celia, how?" Cassian stammered, taking a step forward. Explanations later. Celia cut him off gently but firmly. "Lady Alara needs medical attention, and Lysara needs its rulers." She leaped down from the outcrop, landing silently on the canyon floor with impossible grace. She moved towards Lady Alara, her movements fluid and precise, even hooded. She radiated competence and authority. Avelia watched, stunned, as Celia quickly examined Lady Alara's wound, producing medical supplies from hidden pouches within her cloak. Who are you?" Avelia asked again, her voice filled with awe and confusion. Celia paused, glancing up, her face still hidden in shadow. "I am Celia, Cassian's guardian, and an old associate of Cassian Ashbryn." She applied a biofoam bandage to Lady Alara's side, the older woman sighing in relief as the pain lessened. "Malric Vornar has underestimated House Ashbryn and House Virellan. It is time to remind him of the cost of betrayal." Celia straightened up, turning to face Cassian and Avelia. "Vornar holds the palace, but his grip is tenuous. Loyalties are divided. We need to rally those loyal to House Virellan. Strike back quickly before he consolidates power." Cassian felt a surge of hope, tempered by the sheer shock of Celia's appearance and the raw power she wielded. Space manipulation, just like him, but on a scale he hadn't imagined. "How? Celia, we're trapped out here." "Not trapped," Celia corrected, "merely inconvenienced." She gestured back towards the tunnel entrance. "These tunnels have other paths, paths that lead back into the city, bypassing Vornar's checkpoints, paths known only to a few. She looked pointedly at Cassian. Paths Cassian Ashbryn helped map, long ago. Avelia stared at Celia, then at Cassian, understanding dawning. The shadow protocol he'd been researching. His grandfather's hidden legacy. You knew about this. You knew how to find us. Avelia asked Celia. I monitor situations that concern my ward, Celia replied evasively. Let's just say I anticipated Vornar might make a move, and I took precautions. She looked towards the dark tunnel. We don't have much time. Vornar will realize Theron has failed. He will send more troops. We need to move, rally support, and prepare the counterattack, Lady Alara. Leaning on Avelia, but looking stronger already thanks to Celia's ministrations, nodded firmly. She is right. We fight back. For Lysara. Avelia looked at Cassian, a newfound respect and determination in her eyes. They had faced death together, escaped through forgotten ways. And now, help had arrived in the most unexpected form. The human she had once scorned was intrinsically linked to this mysterious, powerful guardian, a legacy of the pact she had resented. All right, Celia, Avelia said, finding her resolve. Lead the way. Tell us the plan. Cassian met Celia's hidden gaze, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind, but he pushed them down. Survival first, justice later. He nodded his agreement. Together, the last Ashbryn, the Virellan princess, the wounded queen mother, and the enigmatic guardian turned their backs on the treacherous canyon and plunged back into the ancient tunnels, ready to ignite the flames of rebellion and reclaim their future from the darkness that had engulfed Lysara. The fight was far from over, but now they had a chance, guided by Celia, whose knowledge of the subterranean labyrinth seemed preternatural. They navigated a different network of tunnels, ones that felt subtly energized, humming with latent power. These were not mere service conduits or escape routes. They felt like arteries of the planet itself. Celia explained that these were pathways linked to Lysara's deep energy grid, used by Cassian Ashbryn and Lord Veron during the Scourge to move troops undetected. Their existence kept secret even from most Virellans. Cassian had a unique sensitivity to spatial geometries, Celia explained cryptically as they walked, her voice low. Much like you, Cassian. He helped Veron map these flows, create stable passages shielded from detection. This revelation sent a jolt through Cassian. His power wasn't just some random mutation. It was part of his Ashbryn heritage, shared by his legendary grandfather. They emerged hours later, not outside the city, but within the vast, echoing energy generation complex beneath the main palace spire. The area was surprisingly quiet. Vornar had focused his troops on securing the upper levels and the seat of power, neglecting the infrastructure below. Celia disabled the few automated security systems with unnerving ease, her fingers dancing over control panels, inputting codes that bypassed Vornar's lockdown. From here, we can access the palace's internal communication network, bypassing Vornar's jammers, Celia stated, gesturing towards a shielded terminal. Lady Alara. Princess Avelia, you need to contact your loyalists. Captain Vorn of the Royal Guard, Chancellor Riva, anyone you trust implicitly. Tell them you are alive. Tell them to prepare. Vornar's hold is built on the assumption that you are dead or captured. Showing yourselves, even remotely, will shatter his narrative. While Lady Alara, her strength returning, and Avelia worked at the terminal, sending coded messages through secure back channels. Celia pulled Cassian aside. You handled yourself well. Cassian, she said, her voice softening slightly. Using your ability defensively, protecting others, Cassian would have been proud. Celia, your power, Cassian began, the question burning in his mind. It's like mine, but stronger, more controlled. Celia finished for him. Let's just say I've had more time to practice, and my connection to it is perhaps different. Not all who can touch the spaces between do so in the same way. She paused, her hooded gaze seeming to penetrate his thoughts. Your potential is vast, Cassian, greater than Kale's, I suspect. But you need control, discipline, what you did in the Grand Hall, in the council chamber. Necessary, yes, but reckless. It depleted you dangerously. I didn't have a choice. Cassian argued quietly. There is always a choice, Celia countered. Sometimes the most powerful action is inaction, letting events unfold until the precise moment for intervention. You are learning, but you must learn faster. Malric Vorner is not Lorivas or Theron. He is cunning, ruthless, and powerful in his own right. What now? Cassian asked. We rally support, but how do we retake the palace? Vornar has elite troops, control of the main systems. Vornar's strength is also his weakness, Celia mused. He relies on technology, on overwhelming force. He doesn't understand the true heart of Lysara, the bond between the Virellans and this world. The deep energy flows, and he certainly doesn't understand us. A faint, almost imperceptible smile seemed to touch her hidden lips. We will use the palace against him. We fight smart, not hard. Create diversions, sow confusion, isolate him. And then, Cassian, you will face him. Me. Cassian felt a chill despite the ambient heat from the generators. Why me? Because this is your fight too, Celia said firmly. Vornar destroyed your family, tried to extinguish your house. Reclaiming Lysara for the Virellans is only half the battle. You must confront the man who embodies the shadow that has haunted you. It is your destiny, the culmination of Kale's legacy and your own survival. Her voice was resolute, leaving no room for doubt. I will help you. I will guide you. But the final blow must be yours. Before Cassian could respond, Avelia called out from the terminal. We've made contact. Captain Vorn is mobilizing loyal guards in the lower barracks. Chancellor Riva is securing support among the civilian districts. They're ready for our signal. Celia nodded. Good. Then the time has come. She turned to face them all. Our E-strike needs to be decisive. We will use the energy grid to create a surge, temporarily disabling Vornar's main security network and communications. During that window, Vorn's forces will attack from below. You. She looked at Lady Alara and Avelia. Will broadcast a message to the entire planet, revealing Vornar's treachery and rallying the people. Cassian and I, she finished, her gaze locking with his, will deal with Malric Vornar himself. The plan was audacious, dangerous, relying on perfect timing and Vornar underestimating them. But it was their best chance. Let's do it, Avelia said, her eyes blazing with determination. Lady Alara nodded her assent, her regal composure fully restored. Celia moved to the main energy grid console, her fingers flying across the controls, inputting complex sequences. Cassian watched, fascinated by the effortless way she manipulated systems that should have been impenetrable. Avelia stood beside him, her presence a silent source of strength. Their shared ordeal had forged a bond deeper than any arranged marriage pact could have mandated. They were partners now, united against a common foe. The surge is primed, Celia announced, stepping back from the console. It will initiate in 5 minutes, creating a 60-second window of system blackout across the main spire. Vorn knows the timing. Lady Alara, Princess, prepare your broadcast. As the women moved to the comm station, Celia turned back to Cassian. Are you ready? Cassian took a deep breath, centering himself, feeling the familiar hum of space around him. But this time, it felt less alien, more like an extension of himself. He thought of his murdered family, of Kale's legacy, of Avelia fighting for her home. Yes, he said, his voice clear and steady. I'm ready. Good, Celia said. Remember your training, control, precision, and trust your instincts. She placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, a rare gesture of connection. Kale's strength flows within you. Let it guide you. The countdown timer on the console reached 0. With a low hum, the lights in the generation complex flickered. Across the palace spire above, alarms momentarily died. Screens went dark. Automated defenses fell silent. The counterattack had begun. Now, Celia commanded, already moving towards a high-speed lift that accessed the upper levels. Let's go pay Lord Vornar a visit. Cassian followed, his heart pounding not with fear, but with grim resolve. He was no longer just the orphan survivor, the reluctant fiancé. He was Cassian Ashbryn, heir to a hidden power, and he was going to reclaim his family's honor and help save a world. He glanced back at Avelia, who gave him a sharp, encouraging nod before turning to the broadcast controls with her mother. Their fates were intertwined now, more deeply than either could have imagined just days before. He turned back towards the lift, towards the confrontation awaiting him in the heart of the stolen palace. Justice was coming for Malric Vornar. The lift ascended with blurring speed, Celia having bypassed all security protocols. They emerged into the chaos of the palace's upper levels. Vornar's forces, caught off guard by the system blackout and the simultaneous attack from below, were scrambling, disorganized. Alarms began blaring again as backup systems kicked in, but the crucial window had been used. Loyal Virellan guards, led by Captain Vorn, were engaging the Vornar troops in fierce firefights along the main corridors. Explosions rocked the spire. Vornar will be in the throne room, trying to re-establish control, Celia said, her voice calm amidst the cacophony. She moved with uncanny speed and certainty through the fighting, seeming to anticipate enemy movements, guiding Cassian through less contested side passages. Cassian followed closely, occasionally using precise bursts of spatial distortion to disorient Vornar's soldiers who blocked their path, conserving his energy as Celia had advised. They reached the antechamber to the throne room. Heavy blast doors slammed shut just as they approached. 2 elite Vornar guards stood, defensively, weapons raised. Predictable, Celia murmured. She didn't engage them directly. Instead, she placed her hands flat against the wall beside the blast doors. Cassian felt a powerful wave of spatial manipulation, far stronger than anything he could manage. The solid crystalloid wall seemed to flow like liquid for a moment, creating an opening large enough for them to slip through before reforming, as if it had never been disturbed. The guards stared in disbelief, momentarily forgetting their posts. They stepped into the magnificent throne room. At the far end, upon the ancient crystal throne of the Virellans, sat Malric Vornar. He looked furious, barking orders into a comm unit that was clearly malfunctioning due to the ongoing system disruptions. Several high-ranking Vornar officers stood nearby, along with a handful of his personal guard. The battle raged just outside the doors they hadn't used. Vornar looked up as they entered, his eyes widening in shock, then narrowing into slits of pure hatred as he recognized Cassian, and then Celia, whose reputation, it seemed, preceded her even hidden beneath a hood. "You?" Vornar snarled, rising from the throne, drawing an ornate energy pistol. "The Ashbryn whelp! And the Shadow Weaver!" He spat Celia's apparent moniker like a curse. "How did you get in here?" Doors hold little meaning for us. Malric, Celia replied coolly. Your reign is over, is it? Vornar sneered, gesturing to his guards. You are outnumbered. Trapped, are we? Celia tilted her head slightly, behind Vornar, through the throne room's main viewports. The vast holographic displays flickered back to life. But instead of tactical data, they showed Lady Alara and Avelia, broadcasting their message across Lysara. Avelia's voice, filled with fiery conviction, echoed faintly in the throne room. Malric Vornar is a traitor. Loyalists of Lysara, rise up, reclaim our world, fight for House Virellan. Vornar's face contorted with rage as he realized his control was crumbling. His legitimacy shattered planet-wide. Kill them, he roared at his guards. Kill them now! The Vornar guards surged forward. Celia met them head-on. Cassian had never seen anything like it. She moved like a phantom, a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Space itself seemed to bend around her, deflecting energy blasts, causing guards to stumble into each other, their weapons firing harmlessly into the ceiling. She disarmed and incapacitated them with blinding speed and efficiency, using minimal force. Her movements a terrifyingly beautiful dance of spatial manipulation. Within seconds, the elite guards lay groaning on the floor, disarmed and helpless. Vornar's officers backed away, fear replacing their arrogance. Malric Vornar stood alone, his plan collapsing around him, his face a mask of fury. He looked from the defeated guards to Celia. Then his burning gaze settled on Cassian. You, he hissed, the last remnant of a weak house. Cassian Ashbryn was a fool to trust Veyron, a fool to think humans could ever stand as equals. I purged your line once. I can do it again, he lunged, not with his pistol, but drawing a wicked-looking energy blade from his belt, its crimson edge humming with power. He ignored Celia, focusing all his rage on Cassian, the symbol of the legacy he had tried to extinguish. Celia stepped back deliberately, giving Cassian space. Her message clear: this is your fight. Cassian met Vornar's charge. He didn't have a weapon, but he had something more fundamental. As Vornar swung the energy blade in a vicious arc aimed at his head, Cassian didn't dodge. He stood his ground, focused his will, and warped the space directly in the blade's path. The crimson energy flickered, its trajectory bending harmlessly around Cassian's head, as if hitting an invisible shield. Vornar stared, momentarily shocked by the impossible defense. Cassian used that instant. He surged forward, not attacking, but using his power subtly. He distorted the space around Vornar's footing, causing the polished floor to become momentarily uneven. Treacherous, Vornar stumbled, his balance compromised. Cassian flowed past his guard, delivering a swift, hard blow to Vornar's wrist, sending the energy blade clattering across the floor. Vornar roared in frustration, lashing out with a powerful kick. Cassian twisted away, using a short burst of spatial contraction to increase his speed. Evading the blow, he danced around Vornar, using his agility and brief, precise spatial manipulations to deflect attacks, create openings, and steadily wear his opponent down. He remembered Celia's words: control, precision. He wasn't trying to overpower Vornar, he was dismantling him piece by piece. Vornar, accustomed to brute force and technological superiority, grew increasingly enraged by his inability to land a solid blow on the elusive human. He was stronger, more experienced in conventional combat, but Cassian's unique abilities were like fighting smoke. Stand still and fight like a man. Whelp, Vornar bellowed, lunging again. Cassian sidestepped, warping the space behind Vornar, causing him to overshoot his lunge and stumble towards the empty throne. With another precise spatial nudge, Cassian sent Vornar crashing onto the steps leading up to the throne, landing hard. Before Vornar could recover, Cassian was there, standing over him. He didn't strike. He simply looked down at the man who had murdered his family, the man who had tried to steal a world. He saw not a fearsome tyrant, but a desperate man consumed by ambition and hatred. "It's over, Vornar," Cassian said, his voice quiet but firm. "Your coup has failed. Your house will answer for its crimes. My family will have justice." Vornar glared up at him, spitting defiance. "You think this changes anything? Others will follow. Humans will always be insects beneath our notice." At that moment, the main throne room doors burst open, not with Vornar soldiers, but with Captain Vorn and a contingent of triumphant royal guards. They quickly secured the remaining Vornar officers. The sounds of fighting outside were diminishing, replaced by cheers. Captain Vorn strode towards the throne, his gaze taking in the scene. Vornar defeated at the steps, Cassian standing over him. Celia watching calmly from the side. He saluted sharply. "Lord Cassian, Lady Celia, the palace is secure. Lady Alara and Princess Avelia are safe and broadcasting. Vornar's forces are surrendering across the city." Cassian looked down at Vornar one last time, then turned away, leaving him to the royal guards who hauled the sputtering, defeated usurper to his feet. He walked towards Celia, the adrenaline slowly fading, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion, but also vindication. Celia met him halfway, placing a light hand on his arm. "You did well, Cassian Ashbryn. Very well indeed." Just then, Avelia rushed into the throne room, her face flushed with victory and relief. She saw Cassian, saw Vornar being led away, and her eyes lit up. She ran towards him, forgetting all decorum, and threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. "Cassian, you did it! You're safe!" she exclaimed, holding him tightly for a moment before pulling back slightly, her violet eyes searching his face. "Are you hurt?" Cassian felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the battle. He managed a small smile. "I'm all right, Avelia. We're all right." Lady Alara entered then, walking with regal grace despite her recent ordeal, flanked by Captain Vorn. She surveyed the scene, her gaze resting on Cassian and Avelia, then moving to Celia with profound gratitude. "Lysara owes you all a debt that can never be repaid," she declared, her voice ringing with emotion. "House Virellan stands strong, thanks to the courage of House Ashbryn and the intervention of a true friend." She inclined her head respectfully towards Celia. Celia returned the gesture with a slight bow. "My purpose was only to protect Cassian and honor an old debt to Kale. The victory belongs to Lysara." In the aftermath, order was restored. Malric Vornar and his key conspirators, including Theron Voltaris, were imprisoned, awaiting trial for treason. The alliance between House Virellan and House Ashbryn, once a source of contention, was now celebrated as the salvation of Lysara. Cassian was no longer seen as an unwelcome outsider, but as a hero, the wielder of mysterious power who had stood against tyranny alongside their princess. Weeks later, beneath the iridescent glow of the twin suns, in the grand hall where Cassian had first faced Avelia's scorn, a different ceremony took place. Cassian Ashbryn and Avelia Virellan stood before the assembled court, not as reluctant participants in an ancient pact, but as willing partners, their bond forged in fire and mutual respect. Lady Alara officiated, her voice filled with pride. When the time came for the vows, Avelia turned to Cassian, her amethyst eyes soft. "I once saw you only as human, Cassian Ashbryn. I was blinded by prejudice. But you showed me courage, honor, and a strength that transcends species. I choose you not because of the pact, but because of who you are." Cassian took her hands, his gray eyes meeting hers, reflecting the light of understanding that now flowed between them. And I saw only a princess bound by duty, Avelia Virellan. But I found a warrior, a leader, and a partner whose spirit matches the fire of her world. I choose you freely, to build a future together. They sealed their vows, not with revulsion or resentment, but with genuine affection and shared hope. The court erupted in cheers, celebrating the union that promised a new era of strength and cooperation for Lysara. Celia watched from the shadows at the edge of the hall, her mission complete. A faint, satisfied smile finally visible beneath her hood before she quietly slipped away, her work done. Years passed. Cassian and Avelia ruled Lysara wisely and justly. Their combined strengths, his strategic mind, and unique abilities, her political acumen and connection to her people, creating a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity. The Ashbryn name was restored, honored not as a dead house, but as a vital part of Lysara's future. Their union, born of an ancient promise and cemented by choice, became a symbol of unity across the nearby systems. Standing on a palace balcony one evening, watching their twin children, a boy with his father's gray eyes and a girl with her mother's violet skin, both already showing faint, shimmering hints of nascent spatial abilities inherited from their Ashbryn lineage, Cassian put his arm around Avelia. "Not quite the future you envisioned for yourself, was it?" he teased gently. Avelia leaned against him, smiling as she watched their children play, their laughter echoing in the crystalline air. "No," she admitted softly, "it's far, far better." The legacy of Cassian Ashbryn and Avelia Virellan was secure, not just through blood or duty, but through understanding, respect, and a love that had blossomed against all odds. The flame of their joined houses burned brightly, a beacon of hope destined to shine across the stars for generations to come, a testament to the strength found not in prejudice, but in unity. Their dynasty, forged in crisis and bound by choice, was just beginning.